first one is Dr. Renu Eapen, who is a neurologist, and I want to take the opportunity to welcome her and to thank ASCO for having such a diverse group here of radiation oncologists, urologists, medical oncologists, and some nuclear medicine physicians as well. So thank you.
Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is absolutely wonderful to be here at the start of this fantastic session at ASCO. I want to thank the chairs and the scientific committee for inviting me. This journey of Radioligand Revolutions has been really quite a fascinating one to take, and I'm looking forward to the abstracts and the science being presented in this session today. So if you don't recognise this image, this is the red centre of the Australian outback. And the structure you can see far off in the distance, that's Uluru, better known as Ayers Rock. It's this massive red rock that stands about 380 metres tall, right smack in the middle of the Australian continent. It's a beautiful place, but as you can see, it's a little bit barren, much like the landscape of radioligand therapy in prostate cancer 10, 15 years ago. If you think back to the ASCO meeting in 2016, can you remember how many abstracts related to radioligand therapy in prostate cancer were there? I asked ChatGPT and the answer was 1. And it was a small 28-patient retrospective series from Münster, Germany, reporting on their initial use and experience with lutetium PSMA. So it's amazing to think how far we've come in just 10 years. When lutetium PSMA first emerged in about 2015, we were about a year into our experience in Australia with PSMA PET imaging. And we were really astonished to see these incredible images of patient response after just 2 cycles of lutetium PSMA. But we needed prospective evidence. And Michael Hoffman and the team at Peter Mac designed the first prospective phase 2 study looking at lutetium PSMA in men with advanced metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer. And this trial gave the data that would change clinical paradigms, and it also showed how impactful a 50-patient study can be. These are the 8 best responders in that study, and you can see really remarkable imaging and biochemical responses, but patients also reported a very significant improvement in pain and in quality of life. So it was obvious that this was something that was very promising. We now have multiple landmark randomised controlled trials that have stamped lutetium PSMA as a standard of care in mCRPC and shown promise in earlier disease settings. This was just in 2024. If you fast forward to today, many more pivotal trials have entered this arena. But how do we put all this data into context? Well, sometimes it's useful to consider this very familiar curve. This is the journey of prostate cancer from localised disease all the way to end-stage disease. So if we consider third-line mCRPC, these are patients who have exhausted all their other lines of treatment. The prospective phase 2 trial from Peter Mac really shows us how beneficial lutetium PSMA can be, and I think this is a reasonable option for those who can tolerate further lines of treatment and have PSMA-avid disease. If we look slightly earlier in the second-line mCRPC setting, now these are patients who are post-taxane-based chemotherapy. We have the VISION and the therapy study that have shown OS and PFS benefit in this setting. Pluvicto is now FDA approved in this setting, and certainly in patients who have PSMA-avid disease and are post-chemotherapy, we would consider this a standard of care. So big tick here as well. What if we move a little bit earlier in the first-line mCRPC setting? These are patients who are post an ARPI but pre-chemotherapy. Well, last year, based on the PSMA-4, a phase 3 study, the FDA approved Pluvicto to move into this earlier line setting. But we did see last month that Novartis withdrew their application in Europe to bring Pluvicto earlier. Additionally, studies like PR21 have shown that perhaps sequencing docetaxel before lutetium PSMA can lead to some improvements in overall survival. So this is still quite a contentious area, but quite interesting. Louise Emmett's work in the ENZA-P study showed very nicely how lutetium PSMA can work in synergy with an AR pathway inhibitor. This is also the first study to look at adaptive dosing. How can we use imaging to minimize toxicity by avoiding unnecessary cycles of therapy? So really personalized treatment. But as ARPIs are getting to be standard of care in MHSPC, the question is, will these ARPI-naive first-line mCRPC patients still exist into the future? Unlikely, but it's really an interesting space to watch. If we move forward into the MHSPC space, we have both the upfront PSMA and the PSMA addition study, both having read out in the last few ESMO meetings. Both food for thought. So far, no OS benefit has been found, and I think everyone would agree this is currently not standard of care, but a very interesting space to study this. And if we move even earlier into that neoadjuvant space, this is the lutectomy trial. This was what my PhD was based on. This is a phase 1-2 study that we ran at Peter Mac in 20 men with biopsy-proven high-risk localized prostate cancer and high uptake on PSMA PET-CT. These men received either 1 or 2 cycles of lutetium PSMA followed by a robotic prostatectomy. And we followed them up for 3 years. Now, we did see some remarkable responses. So, for example, this is a patient who had a PSA of 330 when he was enrolled into the trial. You can see from these images he had a very large, very intensely avid external iliac lymph node that was biopsy-proven prostate cancer. He had 2 cycles of treatment and his PSA dropped to 18, and again, remarkable imaging responses. There was still a big node there, though, and this is the node being removed during his robotic prostatectomy. One important thing to notice here is the tissue planes, despite having received a fairly hefty dose of radiation to this node, the tissue planes are really very well preserved, and surgery is quite straightforward. We don't see any fibrosis or any tissue difficulty around the node, so surgery was very safe in this patient population. The node is being bisected by our anatomical pathologist here. This patient did initially very well. He had an undetectable PSA at 18 months, but we just reported our long-term follow-up at the EAU meeting this year, and in this very high-risk population, the biochemical recurrence rate was 50%. So we really need to do much, much better for these patients. One of the important outcomes from this trial was our ability to study the tissues pre and post lutetium PSMA and understand what effect it has on the tumour immune microenvironment. A lot of this data is unpublished, but we did find that in a small cohort of patients who have baseline evidence of immune activity in their tumours, lutetium PSMA does have the potential to either create or enhance an immunogenic response. But if we get back to the localized prostate cancer setting, we can all agree this is not standard of care and should not be given outside a clinical trial setting. So the landscape now looks a little bit fuller, thanks to the efforts of many people who are in this room today. And we kind of get the sense we're really just at the start of the radioligand therapy journey in prostate cancer. So let's do a little bit of future gazing. What's next? There's no doubt that the time to think beyond PSMA targets is upon us, and we should be looking for new targets that we can use for radioligand therapy. New isotopes are emerging, and we'll hear about some of them this afternoon. And there's no doubt that the future really for lutetium PSMA will be in the form of combination therapies. So new targets. I want to acknowledge Ken Herman here. He gave a fantastic talk at the APCCC about this, and thank you for letting me use some of his pictures. So the prostate cancer cell has been extensively mapped to understand what are the transmembrane targets that can be exploited for both imaging and for theranostics. Now the key here is to pick targets that have low rates of expression on normal healthy tissue like salivary glands, and whose expression will correlate with disease aggressiveness. And there's no fewer than 10 targets that are currently out there and being studied and in phase 1 clinical trials. But 3 of the most promising ones seems to be these. Transmembrane prostatic acid phosphatase. This has almost universal expression in prostate cancer. But a very clean biodistribution. So compared to PSMA 1007, there's almost no salivary gland uptake and almost no renal uptake either. So there are currently radioligands for imaging and for theranostics in development. STEAP1/2, we've heard a lot about these. These are cell surface metalloreductases. They have high prostate specificity. No one really knows the exact function of them, but they're very highly expressed in prostate cancer. And now treatments that target particularly STEAP1, including antibody-drug conjugates, bispecific T-cell engagers like AMG 509, CAR-T therapy, and radioligand therapy are being developed. B7H3 is probably one of the hottest solid tumour radioligand targets, and may be the go-to in the future for very aggressive disease, and probably has a role in either PSMA-resistant or non-avid tumours. And there is a strong rationale for combining immunotherapy and radioligand therapy with this target as well. And there are currently about 3 programs around the world. So what about new isotopes? I think if you leave a nuclear medicine physician alone with the periodic table for an hour, interesting things can happen. And certainly we're going to hear about actinium this afternoon, but lead and copper all seem promising. Louise Emmett just published the co-PSMA trial in European Urology showing how 64 copper, which is a PSMA targeting radionuclide with a much longer half-life of 12 hours, can really lead to much better imaging quality, especially in the biochemical recurrence setting, and this will have a lot of implication for treatment as well. I just want to focus for a brief moment on terbium. The Violet trial was presented by James Buteau and Michael Hoffman here at ASCO last year. This was a first-in-human trial of terbium-161, which emits beta electrons, much like lutetium PSMA, but it also emits Auger and conversion electrons, which have a very short distance of action and may better target micrometastatic disease. So in this trial, we saw very deep PSA responses in a significant number of patients with encouraging safety profile as well. So this is one to watch in the future. And there's no doubt that combination therapy with lutetium PSMA is going to be a big part of the future. This is just a selection of trials from Australia alone. Radiosensitizers, drugs that can upregulate and enhance the effect of lutetium PSMA, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, hormone therapy, radiation therapy, they're all being studied. And the translational and biomarker work that's embedded into a lot of these clinical trials will be very informative in telling us which combinations work best together and how do we select the right patient for the right combination. Just before I finish, I want to send out a warm invite to all of you for the prostate preceptorship. This is happening in Melbourne this year in September. Everything you never even realised you wanted to know about theranostics, you can find out here, and it's a great opportunity to visit Australia as well. And I'm never going to waste an opportunity, but this is a favourite topic of ours on GUcast. This is a podcast that I co-host with Declan Murphy, and recently Oliver Sartor and Michael Hoffman came into the studio with us in Melbourne and did some future gazing about radioligand therapy and where we may be in another 10 years' time. So the once barren landscape of radioligand therapy looks very different today. There's been huge progress, major milestones, and I for one believe that the best is yet to come. Thank you so much.